The Seahawks head back home with a little bit of momentum, and they hope to actually win at Lumen Field, but the Saints stand in their way looking to get a little momentum of their own early in the 2025 season. Time to dive into this matchup coming up week 3 here, crossover edition. Locked on Seahawks, Locked on Saints.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Greetings, 12s, and greetings, Saints fans. I'm Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast. Glad to be teaming up with Ross Jackson, Locked On Saints, for our Week 3 crossover special. The Seahawks coming off a big win over the Pittsburgh Steelers on the road. Saints hard-fought loss to the Brock Purdy-less 49ers on Sunday, starting out the season 0-2. And now they have a litmus test getting to go to Lumen Field, which at least used to be a difficult place for teams to win at. Not necessarily been recently, but going against a Seahawks team that's feeling pretty darn good after going to Pittsburgh and beating Aaron Rodgers and company in a pretty convincing 14-point victory.
Yeah, I mean, look, let me start off, too, by saying hello to everybody and, of course, giving a shout out to our first listens and our everydayers. Thanks for being here. And I think the other big thing here for New Orleans, like the biggest story for them, comes all the way down to just simply building some momentum. You said it earlier, like the New Orleans Saints started off having some promising games here up against the Arizona Cardinals and San Francisco 49ers. I think the expectations in New Orleans are a little bit different than they are in a place like Seattle, where, you know, there's an expectation for maybe playoffs and things like that. Here in New Orleans, it's all about, can this team just simply show progress? And one of the big things that they can do in this game is show that they can take the show on the road. Because right now, there's no real indication to know whether or not they can. It's going to be Kellen Moore's first road game as a head coach, Brandon Staley's first road game as a defensive coordinator here in New Orleans, Spencer Rattler's 4th career road game as well. And so going to a place like Lumen Field, regardless of what it's been like in the past, or like what it's been like recently, is still a very hard place to go and win for football teams that don't have a lot of experience going on the road. And right now, Corbin, this is a New Orleans Saints team that's inexperienced in those situations playing away from home.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the Seahawks, as you mentioned, I've kind of hit on it as well. They have won one road game since week 3 of the 2024 season, which is just unheard of for the Seattle Seahawks. They went 3-6 there last year, losing 6 of their last 7 at home. And then this year they opened with a tough loss to the 49ers, a game that very much could have gone either way. But so you're looking at a team that's 3-7 under Mike Macdonald at home games. And on a road, they've been near unbeatable. They last year won 7 games on the road. And then this year they get their road win to open the season in Pittsburgh. They just, for whatever reason, they have played better away from Lumen Field. And you would think with the home field advantage the Seahawks have that would not be the case. But for whatever reason, these games at home, it doesn't matter whether it's rain, shine, snow. It doesn't matter what the weather is. They come out flat on both sides of the ball pretty much every single game, and it hasn't mattered opponent, whether it's a better team, somebody that's viewed as inferior. Whatever reason, they don't look as comfortable playing at home, which
that's super interesting.
The Legion of Boom era, where they would win every time they were at home. Even 2020 without fans, they went undefeated at home. I mean, this is a team that traditionally has been very difficult to beat in Seattle, and that has not been the case. And I know Mike Macdonald is extremely frustrated about it, but it boils down to getting off to a faster start. And maybe they'll be able to do it this week because the 22-game streak they had without a touchdown to open the game offensively finally was snapped on Sunday in Pittsburgh. Maybe that is going to break the curse, and this is a team that can come out and take some control early in this game. But I can tell you, if it's like every other game at Lumen recently, if the Saints are allowed to hang around and make some plays early and the Seahawks aren't doing what they need to do, this is very much a game that could be on the upset radar just because of how Seattle has played, and it's inexplicable. You don't understand why it's been such an issue. But this team has been one of the worst teams at home in the NFL for the last couple of years. Even the last year Pete Carroll was here, I believe they lost 3 games at home that year. It has been a struggle for whatever reason, and the 12s have been selling more of their tickets as a
Yeah, we've seen that a little bit here in New Orleans too, man. We've certainly seen that a little bit more here. It's been a big thing. I will say, you point out something really, really important when you talk about the fast start and finally getting that first opening drive touchdown and that long drought there. New Orleans, like one of the big things that has kind of been a bit of a, I'll call it a bit of a hurdle for them, has been the slow start. This went Derek Carr and the New Orleans Saints last year. They started slow. When Spencer Rattler became the starting quarterback last year, they started slow. So far this year, they've started slow as well, including up against San Francisco, a really good opening drive that ended up with a misconnection in the end zone between Rattler and wide receiver Chris Olave in the end zone there that ended up leading to a field goal attempt that Blake Grupe missed from 40 yards out, who's now missed 2 kicks in his first 2 games. And so that fast start piece is a really, really good note from you, because if Seattle starts off fast, but New Orleans still starts off sluggish, that can be and has been what has created some early deficits for New Orleans to try to claw back from that they haven't been able to completely do just yet, although they have been fighting in the late portions of each of the 2 games that they played so far this year.
I always look at games like this, and this is not taking a shot at the Saints. It's just with the inexperience and the new coach and the fact they started 0-2. Seattle is favored by a touchdown going into this game. And the Seahawks, even in their loss, they were very competitive with the 49ers. And the Saints, to their credit, they fought back and made that game interesting this past week as well. But I always look at games like this as snowball games where, and if Seattle's an underdog too going into a game like this, I view it the same way, where you have to make sure the avalanche doesn't hit and you get that snowball rolling. And Seattle, in this case, they need to be the snowball. You need to make that avalanche happen and make the Saints realize we're not going to get in this game and have that rough start. And Seattle just hasn't been able to do that at home. And in their Super Bowl years, and even the few years after that, they were so good at putting teams away early. And they just haven't been able to do that at home. And that's been part of the reason they have struggled so much. So I think it is safe to say, Ross, that this game, as much as any game, for what these 2 teams are dealing with the Saints, their slow starts anywhere, the Seahawks at home, just consistently been chronically hitting the snooze button when the game starts, that it is going to be imperative for whoever wants to win this game to at least get off to a relatively smooth start on offense and defense.
Yeah, that's going to be huge. I think that is absolutely, we'll get into some of the matchups, but I think that's one of those big time keys for either one of these teams. Whoever starts fast might outlast. That's the way that I look at it when it comes to this matchup between the Saints and the Seahawks.
And speaking of matchups, we're going to get to some of the key ones to watch at Lumen Field here in just a moment, including Saints interior offensive line going up against the 3-headed monster led by Leonard Williams on the defensive line. We'll be diving into that up next here on our Crossover Thursday edition here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Mazda crafts cars for those who choose to do more than simply move. They follow what moves them every time they drive, and that's what makes Mazda stand out. They go beyond safety, style, and performance to deliver a driving experience that feels alive in every detail. As an athlete focuses on every detail, Mazda does the same. From metallic accents to hand-stitched Napa leather, you can feel it the moment you get behind the wheel. The smooth handling, the intuitive controls, standard all-wheel drive in every crossover SUV. Whether it's a quick drive to practice or a weekend road trip, Mazda makes everyday drives feel special. It's the small details that make all the big plays. And just like there's more to every player, there's more to a Mazda vehicle. Mazda, move and be moved. Welcome back to Crossover Thursday, Locked On Seahawks, Locked On Saints. I'm Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast. He's Ross Jackson, host of the Locked On Saints podcast. And a special thanks to all the 12s and Saints fans tuning in. And thank you to all our everydayers that tune in all 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. Seahawks Saints battling at Lumen Field week 3. And there's a little bit of a horror aspect to this for Seahawks fans because they remember week 3 in 2019 when Teddy Bridgewater and the Saints came in, and a game that I believe that the Saints ended up winning by 6, but it felt like it was 26. A game that Alvin Kamara was out there with butter on his uniform. The Seahawks could tackle him. Bridgewater was throwing at like an 80% completion clip. The offense kept shooting themselves in the foot. Russell Wilson had a rough one that day. A game the Seahawks were favored, and they ended up losing it, and it wasn't near as close as the final score indicated. Seattle stormed back in the fourth quarter with a few lucky bounces. But Seahawks fans have been talking about that a lot already this week. Same week of the season, Lumen Field. Sounds like there might be a chance of a little bit of rain on Sunday. I mean, it's eerily similar in that sense. But Ross, looking at this matchup, Seahawks and Saints, Seattle's come off the big win over the Steelers in Pittsburgh. Saints at 0-2 have been fighting the first 2 weeks, but have come up short in their first 2 games. From a Saints perspective, let's start from their defense, because they made some plays this last week, but Mac Jones also was able to get the ball downfield through the air. 49ers had some success running the ball. What are you looking at matchup-wise for the Saints as far as an area that you think they might be able to have an advantage, or an area that maybe could be a big problem for them in this game going up against Seattle's offense?
Yeah, I think a big thing for me is going to be how the Saints edge defenders set the edge up against a wide zone rushing offense. The Saints did a really good job last week of containing San Francisco's run scheme. They were under 4 yards per carry, even though Christian McCaffrey had a pretty good day on a per carry clip, didn't scratch 60 yards. So the Saints did a pretty good job there. But you got to wonder how much of that was because Mac Jones was finding so much success in that short and intermediate passing game, and especially the 150, 160 plus yards after catch by those wide receivers. So for me, I'm looking at, can the Saints edge defenders set the edge and force Klint Kubiak, who of course was the offensive coordinator here in New Orleans last year. We know very well what it is that he likes to do. The Saints know very well what it is that he likes to do. And of course, Brandon Staley, New Orleans Saints defensive coordinator, goes all the way back with that Shanahan tree and that Kubiak, the Gary Kubiak tree and all that. So he knows very well the tenets of that Klint Kubiak offense and how that run game can open up that really explosive potential that this Seattle Seahawks passing game has, especially with sort of the career rebirth of Sam Darnold, who I'm not the biggest believer in, I'm not fully convinced by, but he looked great up against Pittsburgh despite the couple of turnovers there. And so finding the ways to kind of disrupt and force Klint Kubiak into doing things that he's uncomfortable doing, I think is going to be big. And so the edge defenders of Carl Granderson and Cam Jordan, potentially Chase Young if he's back. He's missed the last 2 weeks with a calf injury to start the season. So if he's back, he'll be a part of that as well. If they can force some of that rushing game to stay inside the tackles, it might get Klint Kubiak a little bit in his head like we saw pretty often here in New Orleans, and give that Saints passing defense, which has been a little weak to start off the season, maybe a little bit of breathing room.
And see, I'm looking at it from that other perspective. You mentioned the Saints' issues they've had in the passing game and what Mac Jones did to them this past week. Seattle's receivers, what a difference week 1 to week 2 was. Everybody was coming out of week 1. Man, nobody other than Jackson Smith and Jigba here. It's a one-man show. And then this past week, Cooper Kupp was racking up yards after the catch, looked really smooth with the ball in his hands. Torrey Horton caught his first touchdown. He had a great training camp, and now getting to see him start to come together. They've got Jake Bobo and Derek Young back healthy. Neither one of them caught a pass this week, but both those guys could easily have a big part in the offense this week against the Saints. I think when you see what Mac Jones is able to do, Sam Darnold, I'll give him credit. Like, he seems to be past the seeing ghost thing. Like, he took some shots this week and delivered strikes for big plays, including the Torrey Horton touchdown, the moxie and the ability to fight back when things don't go well. I think the ability for him to attack the middle of the field, that has been a huge thing these first couple of weeks. The Saints
struggled to defend that last week, too.
I look for the Seahawks to continue to try to force the issue there. Not that they're going to just suddenly become a pass-heavy team, but I could see them coming out to pass to open up the run this week and really take advantage of a secondary that has some inexperience and a lot of guys that hadn't started many games going into this year.
Yeah, second-year corner in Kool-Aid McKinstry and a rookie safety in Jonas Sanker lining up next to a great veteran in Justin Reed, but still a rookie safety there who was impressive against San Francisco. San Francisco never completed a pass more than 20 air yards down the field. But when you're allowing the catch and runs and you're struggling with tackling, you can complete those passes 6 yards down the field. It's not going to stop them from turning into 40-plus.
Yeah, that was a major issue for them, and the Seahawks look like they, at least this last week, were able to get some of that yak going that is a big part of the Shanahan-style scheme. As far as flipping the script here, for the Saints on offense going to get up against the Seahawks defense that may or may not have Devin Witherspoon and Nick Emanwari back this week, we will have a better idea once we get to Friday whether either of those players is going to suit up. But even without those guys, this defense still held the Steelers to 17 points, and one of those touchdowns came very short field. This defense has been very stout the first couple weeks. They've met up to expectations for the most part. when you look at New Orleans offensively, what is a matchup that jumps out to you going into this game against Seattle's stingy defense?
Yeah, this is super easy for me. It's the interior of the trenches. It's all about guys like right guard Cesar Ruiz, left guard Dylan Radins, or potentially Trevor Penning if he's able to be back. He's missed the opening 2 games as well. He coming off of a toe injury. And then center Eric McCoy going up against the Leonard Williamses of the world and the Byron Murphys of the world. And I'm sure the Jerron Reeds of the world, like going up against these really, really good, this really spectacular interior defensive line that Seattle just keeps reloading and rebuilding year after year. It's that to me is the big thing that could settle this game. Because when you have a young quarterback like Spencer Rattler, if you get some of that pressure immediately up the middle, that creates some issues for him, right? The closest distance between 2 points is a straight line, and being able to generate a pass rush right up the middle, especially over 51. That's the player that everybody for the Seahawks should be watching on the Saints offensive line, Cesar Ruiz, who's oftentimes reaching backwards towards his quarterback. That's not a great position to be in as an offensive lineman, and it's one that he finds himself in a little bit too often. And so the Saints interior offensive line up against that very talented and stout interior defensive line, for Seattle is my big matchup that I'm watching for the Saints offense.
Yeah, we're in agreement from a Seattle's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Look, if you want to get Spencer Rattler rattled in this game, get that interior pressure, which they have been doing both the last 2 games. Leonard Williams looks just as good as last year, albeit with just half a sack so far. But he looks like he's going to have a game coming up. Maybe it's this week where he's going to get a couple sacks because he's been very close. Byron Murphy II's already doubled his total from last year. Not that took much, but he looks like a different player this year, much more comfortable. Jaron Reed's the guy that just doesn't get talked about much outside of Seattle. That is a dang good football player.
He's so good, man.
A guy that was supposed to be a run defender only coming out of Alabama, and he has had a fantastic career where now the pass rush has really the last 5 or 6 years been a big part of his game. So those 3, they're going to move DeMarcus Lawrence inside on 3rd down sometimes, and that creates an issue for guards as well.
Yep.
They're going to be sending a wave of interior defender. Mike Morris had a good game last week, and he's like their 5th guy on that interior defensive line. They like that group. I have to go with something that's more of a PTSD thing, and that's Alvin Kamara. Look, I know that the Saints' run game has not been great early on this year, and there's been some concern to the offensive line. But it just seems like Alvin Kamara, like for whatever reason, he comes to Seattle, especially if it's raining. Like I said, it feels like he's got butter on his jersey. Like tacklers just falling off him. And the Seahawks missed 13 tackles on Sunday against Pittsburgh. I think half of them came on one play. And that's noteworthy.
No.
The 65-yard catch by Jalen Warren, 65 yards. There might have been 60 missed tackles on that play. But they missed quite a few tackles last week. So you better be bringing your hard hat and making sure you're getting a good pursuit angle and lining up and getting a wrap on Alvin Kamara. Otherwise, you could have a repeat. I'm looking at Seattle's linebackers, Ernest Jones, Tyrese Knight, who missed most of training camp. He looked better this week in his 2nd game back. But those guys are going to be tested. The linebackers, if the front line's winning, maybe it's not as big of a deal. But those linebackers, sideline to sideline, dealing with Alvin Kamara, that is still a matchup in this game that I'm not going to say I'm necessarily scared but that is a huge matchup that I think has to bear watching. When we come back, we are going to talk keys to victory and some predictions against the spread. Seahawks Saints getting ready to duel on Sunday. Don't go away. You're listening to the Crossover Thursday special. Locked on Seahawks, Locked on Saints. Caffeine just got a flavor upgrade. 5-hour energy shots deliver tasty caffeine in 17 bold flavors. Each 2-ounce shot packs the caffeine of a premium 12-ounce cup of coffee plus B vitamins and nutrients with 0 sugar and 0 crashes. What I love most is how portable they are. Big taste in a tiny shot. You can take it anywhere. Get that boost when you need it. I always reach for my favorite flavor, Hawaiian Breeze, because it's refreshing and gives me that quick lift before a busy day podcasting and writing. And honestly, I love how fast it kicks in, gets me rolling right out of bed. Sugar-free, don't have to worry about crashing later. Enough with boring, flavorless caffeine. It's time to give your caffeine a flavor upgrade with 5-hour energy shots. Get the favorites you love or be bold and try something new in store and online at 5hourenergy.com or Amazon today. This episode's also brought your way by Prize Picks, the daily fantasy app. We're making the right call. can actually pay off. You and I make decisions every day, but on Prize Picks, being right means you get to cash in. With football-backed Prize Picks, the simplest and fastest way to get in the action. Just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player projections, and you can turn your takes into real prizes all in less than 60 seconds. I've been playing Prize Picks a lot lately. It's so much fun, and it allows me to stay locked in throughout the season. It's quick, easy, and my favorite way to follow along with football. I love checking into projections like Lamar Jackson for more or less than 270 passing yards, or Saquon Barkley for more or less than 2 rushing touchdowns. This week's max discount, $9.21. We got Patrick Mahomes for the Chiefs, 0.5 passing yards. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code LOCKEDINNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's LOCKEDINNFL for $50 in lineups after you play your first $5. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. Welcome back to Crossover Thursday. Locked On Seahawks, Locked On Saints. I'm Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast. He's Ross Jackson of the Locked On Saints podcast. And a special thanks to all the 12s and Saints fans tuning in. And thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks and Locked On Saints your first listen 5 days a week. We've got a big matchup coming up here, Ross, on Sunday. And for the Saints at 0-2, they're just looking to get into the win column. The Seahawks were able to do that this past week against the Steelers. They're riding momentum coming out of a game they were losing at halftime and then decisively won in the second half. They're hoping to carry that over at home, whereas we've talked about a lot in this episode. It has not been easy sledding for the Seahawks at home. Looking from a Saints perspective, what are a few things that jump out to you? If they're going to get that big win and they're going to continue Seattle's horrors at Lumen Field, what are a few things that the Saints are going to need to do? What do they need to accomplish this weekend at Lumen to get to 1-2 in the season?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I have 2 easy ones. Spencer Rattler has to keep his momentum going. He was great and he was really good in week 1, and then he got even better going into week 2. So keep that momentum going when you're going up against a tougher opponent and you're facing only your 4th road game of your career here in the early going. So that's a big one for me. And then, of course, the last thing is just the other thing is just simply the defense just kind of has to get fixed. I mean, look, and especially fixing their own momentum. They are one of the worst teams right now when it comes to third down conversion, allowing 50% of third downs to be converted by the opponent. They're one of only 4 teams that's over 50% conversion percentage. And if you look at where they are on 3rd and 7 or more, they're allowing 40% of those to be converted. They're one of the best first down teams in the NFL, top 3 in the league in yards per play and first down, but they are just not doing themselves any favors when it comes to third down. So I think that a big part of this is going to be, can they get pressure on third down? Saints have a 22.2% pressure rating. That's 31st in the NFL, 30th in the NFL. It's one of the worst in the league. And so can they start to tick that up and find a way to be able to create some impact so they can get off the field on third downs? If the Saints can do those 2 things, that's going to lay the foundation for them to win if they could pull off an upset. But without those 2 things, they'd never be able to pull off an upset.
Yeah, for me, from Seattle's perspective, I'm keeping it really easy here as far as what they need to do on offense. Klint Kubiak, whatever you did last week with your set of plays to open each half, do it again. Come out with the quick starts and play your game. I thought in week 1 against the 49ers, I don't know if it's because he felt like Kyle Shanahan knew everything that he was going to try to do. He just wasn't Klint Kubiak. Like, he was trying to run a bunch of single back stuff, few double tight end sets, 1 play action pass the entire game. Like, it didn't even feel like Klint Kubiak was calling the game. This past week, he got back to what he believes in. He got back to his philosophy. They got their wide zone going, had some split zone as well to get Ken Walker to third going. You got to have fast starts. So whatever was working on those scheduled plays, that needs to happen again this week. Come out and set the tone early. And then on defense, make Spencer Rattler's life miserable with interior pressure and edge pressure. The edge has been less consistent to this point.
Sure.
It feels like Boye Mafe and those guys are eventually going to start really getting after QBs, in part because of what Leonard Williams and Byron Murphy and Jaron Reed are doing in the middle. But to me, if they can do those 2 things, if they can get off to a quick start, avoid the early turnovers that have dogged them, here in this early part of the season. And defensively, to me, it's just playing their game. Get that front four. They're the best in the NFL right now at turning up pressure with four-man rushes. Keep that going this week. Let your back defenders in the secondary and linebacker make their plays in coverage with the ball getting out quickly. If you're not getting sacks, it's getting the ball out fast and create turnovers, which they have been doing in bunches here the first 2 weeks. Feels like if they do those two things as the favorite going into this game, that they can make life tough on the Saints. If they're not able to do those things, though, and the Saints hang around, as we've seen, Lumen Field, they've let teams hang around, and then teams have escaped with victories, which makes it interesting considering that the Seahawks are 7-point favorites going into this match.
Yeah, absolutely. And the way I see this game shaking out, I think Seattle wins this game handily. I just think Seattle is in a different class right now than where the Saints are, and that's okay. Saints are just in a different part of their life cycle right now, starting their upward trajectory. So I've got Seattle winning this game 27-17 pretty decisively here. There's a chance that the Saints still find a way to impress individually, perhaps, whatever that might be, but I don't expect them to go to Lumen Field and steal one. And if they do, I think it will be a surprise of all surprises. You're going to see a lot of Saints fans feeling pretty good about where the Saints are headed after that.
I think the Seahawks are going to cover in this game. I think that the 7-point favorites, I think they are going to cover that just as you are predicting. I'll give my exact score and reasons behind it tomorrow. But make sure to check out our Friday episodes of Locked On Seahawks and Locked On Saints as your first listen. And for your second listen, tune in to Locked On NFL with Tyler the Madman Rowland, giving you a shot of espresso to start your football day. And then Tony Wiggins takes you into the barbershop. Trust me, the smoothest breakdowns to end the day. Find Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday. Make sure to tune into both Locked On Seahawks and Locked On Saints on Friday.